Welcome to All Right in Sin City, a podcast about writers and writing in the Windsor-Detroit region. Your podcasters today are
Sarah Jarvis, former bookseller, publishing rep, and literary festival chair.
Kim Conklin, Windsor-based writer and filmmaker.
and me, Irene Moore Davis, author, educator, and local historian. This recording takes place online with safe physical distancing. Our guest today is Dr. Heidi L.M. Jacobs. She was born and raised in Edmonton, a graduate of the University of Alberta, the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and Western University. She is currently the English and History Librarian at the University of Windsor. Those of you who are regular listeners may recall that we interviewed Jacobs last June, just after the release of her debut novel, Molly of the Mall, Literary Lass, and Purveyor of Fine Footwear. Recently, Heidi L.M. Jacobs was announced as the winner of the 2020 Stephen Leacock Memorial Medal for Humour for her novel. So we've invited her to come back and celebrate with us. Welcome, Heidi.
Hi, nice to see you all. Thank you for having me again.
Thank you for being had. A great deal has happened since you released Molly of the Mall just a little over a year ago. What has surprised you most about the way your novel has been received, whether by critics or by readers?
I'd sort of forgotten about it because it was released, and it just sort of worked its way through things, and people would email every once in a while, and then suddenly it's got this big new explosion, and it's been really quite remarkable to be talking to you about this book in my office where I wrote it at the desk. So it's very strange to have all these people sort of in my space talking about stuff that was in my head and on my laptop for so long. So but yeah, it's been quite remarkable. I just got a tweet the other day. Someone said, I've never read a novel. It seems like it was written especially for me, and I thought that was really quite lovely. So I think there's a few people out there who are connecting out with it, and then and finding it funny too, which is always really good too.
So, speaking of funny, what has it meant to you to win the Leacock Medal?
Well, I was telling someone it was sort of kind of like winning the gold in the Funny Person Olympics in Canada, because it was just, it was really quite remarkable, and I was really, really thrilled. My brother, Paul, had said, your humor is very much like your mom's and your aunt's, and so that was really lovely because they're no longer with us, but I was really gratified that their humor is been recognized, and so the White with a Y family humor is recognized. I imagine them laughing away too and giggling, so that was really, really lovely and gratifying.
So where were you when you heard the news, and what was your first reaction?
Well, I knew I would hear it was Friday the 5th, I think it was. But I didn't know how, and I didn't know when. And so I got up, and it was a really lovely day, and I went for a long run and came back and checked my phone, and I had the alarm on just in case, like, it's usually silent. So I turned it on. But I sat there and I watched my bird feeders for a while, and I had some water, and I just enjoyed the day. And then I just happened to look over at my phone, and all these alerts. It was like you've got 18 alerts on Twitter, and I thought, oh my, what's going on here? And that's how I found out that it was, I think Twitter knew before I did, and then I realized I actually hadn't turned the alarm on my phone, so I missed a phone call from the Leacock people, and so I went inside and found my husband Dale, and I said, I think I won. And we looked at it, and you did. And I was just so shocked because I had actually placed 2 wagers, one on Crow and one on the Drew Hayden Taylor play. So I owe some people 2 shiny toonies for those bets. So so I was really shocked. I'm still sort of shocked, actually, that it hasn't quite sunk in yet.
Let the record reflect that within 24 hours prior to that announcement, I also called it.
You did.
Girl.
Yep. With a U, yeah.
Girl with a U.
Yeah.
So due to the pandemic, there is no gala for the 2020 Leacock finalists this year. Instead, you and the other 2 finalists will be honored in 2021. So This means that you have an entire year to choose your fine footwear.
Yes.
Subject matter of your novel, how much pressure are you feeling about the shoes?
A lot, actually. Actually, at my launch in Edmonton, somebody said, I'm very disappointed in, and I thought, my book? And she said, your choice of footwear tonight, which I thought it was much more elaborate. And I thought, well, I also realized I have to stand for an hour and or more. So, yeah. So I'm going to have to work on it a little bit more for this.
Yeah. It's awful. Publishing people are very judgmental about shoes, which is possibly one of the reasons I'm not in the business anymore. So.
Well, yeah, it's just a combination of librarian and publishing. It's just, yeah.
Yeah. Now, will there be a gown to go with this, or are you going to start with the shoes and work your way up?
Well, I don't know. I really don't know. I did see a pair of Hello Kitty Doc Martens, and I thought, oh, I could start there. I don't know. Yeah, did you buy the dress to match the shoes? Probably for this novel. I think I should. Yeah.
Yeah, you probably won't be able to compete with like high heels, but if you go stylishly in the other direction, I think you might be onto something.
I might, or maybe I'll just bring about 5 or 6 pairs and just rotate through the gala. I think that might work, and then I'll, hedge my bets on them.
You'll have to assess whether you have to climb stairs to a stage or something like that.
Exactly. So many things to think about. Yeah. But there is, I mean, with the shoe on the cover of the book, there's a lot of pressure.
A footwear fashion show does sound like a good idea.
Oh,
yeah, I think so, definitely. So you are working on a couple of other books. What can you tell us about them?
I am. I'm working on one with my husband, Dale Jacobs, called 100 Miles of Baseball. And shoes are mentioned in that book. And it's a book about 2018. Dale and I went to 50 baseball games within a 100-mile radius of our house in one summer. So it's a 2-voiced narrative of what all that entails. And I do talk about shoes and Jane Austen and root vegetables. I do talk about those things. So that's coming out next opening day in 2021, so March 2021. And I'm also working on a kind of a biography of the 1934 Chatham Colored All-Stars with my colleague Miriam Wright. And it's a project that is very near and dear to my heart. I've been working on it for quite a while in different forms. And that's coming along slowly but surely. And it's a true labor of love. I'm working on this one. So they were the first Black team to win the Ontario Baseball Amateur Association Championship in 1934. So it's a very timely story. It's always a timely story, but it's I think a lot of people are more interested in our local history than they have been for a while. So I'm excited to get that one out as well.
Do you have any more fiction working around in your head?
Yeah, it's all just kind of up here right now. I had hoped to spend May and June working on some new fiction ideas, but I don't know. I'm finding it just difficult to think funny thoughts right now. Yeah, I'm slowly finding things funny again, which is I'm hoping we will all feel that way soon too. But yeah. So I would like to get back to fiction. I really like it, and this has sort of been a nice affirmation that I was onto something. So I'd like to go back, but we'll see. I have to get these other books finished first, and see where it goes from there.
Thank you, Heidi L.M. Jacobs, for speaking with us today, and congratulations once again. So because we believe in reduce, reuse, recycle, we're now going to replay our 2019 episode with Heidi L.M. Jacobs, winner of the 2020 Stephen Leacock Memorial Medal for Humour. Dear listeners, enjoy.
Thank you so much.
So I'm so pleased that we have Heidi L.M. Jacobs with us today. She was born and raised in Edmonton, Alberta, where I'm told that the sun sets after 10 p.m. and rises again sometime around 5 a.m. right now, which is so super cool. Wow. She completed her bachelor's and master's degrees in English at the University of Alberta, as well as a master's of library and information science from Western and a PhD in English from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. She's currently the English and History Librarian at the University of Windsor and co-director of something very cool, the Center for Digital Scholarship. And she is a superb writer. So her brand new novel is Molly of the Mall, Literary Lass and Purveyor of Fine Footwear, Her History and Misadventures, released just this spring by New West Press. Welcome, Heidi Jacobs.
Hi, nice to be here.
So why Moll Flanders? What about the historical version of the character appealed to you?
Well, it's funny. Because you had mentioned you might talk to me about that, so I brought my original undergrad copy, which I'm holding up to the microphone, which is really useful in a podcast. But what was funny is here's my bookmark from probably page 172 from when I first started as an undergrad, and I didn't finish it then, and it wasn't until I was toward the end of my revisions with this book that I thought I should actually read the whole book, and I did. But one of the things that I found interesting was I had changed the Moll, M-O-L-L, to M-A-L-L as an undergrad, thinking that it was a really funny thing. And so I had the idea years and years and years ago about, wouldn't it be funny to do a book about West Edmonton Mall with Moll Flanders? So it kind of came as a joke, and then I thought, actually, this might work. And so I kept working on it, and the original title for the book was Edmonton Moll Flanders, and we had to change it for a range of reasons, but I think it was one of those things that actually worked, and once we got rid of the title, it still actually sort of worked in terms of coming to terms with who you are and where you're from and all sorts of things that you think are set in stone, which actually are a little more flexible than you might realize. So that's where that came from.
May I just comment for the people who aren't looking at this scene right now that Heidi held up her book and showed us that the bookmark in question was an ATM receipt from CIBC circa 1980 or 90 something.
88, yep.
1988.
September.
What is the most ridiculous thing you've ever used as a bookmark to date?
Wow. Food, probably.
Not bacon.
Not bacon, no.
No.
Yeah, just usually it's wrapped,
That's good.
Yeah,
That's helpful.
Yeah.
I'm fond of old lottery tickets too. So.
Usually like plain, boarding passes and train tickets, and actually tons of my undergrad books have little bus transfers and stuff like that. It's kind of a neat little scrapbook usually as you find out such things.
It is. The archaeologists will really dig it one day. I'm confident.
Yeah, and I did have $40. I think I had $40 in September. Oh, $47.41.
That is an undergrad situation for sure.
So your character, Molly, makes she goes on the bus. Mm-hmm. She has her bus passes and gets around on the bus. She seems to avoid taverns and gin joints and debtor's prison. So she also has a little bit of a balance in her bank account. What do you think makes your character a little bit like Moll Flanders? Your Molly like Moll?
Well, there is a part later in the book where her dad actually talks about what he had hoped. So that it necessarily isn't the character, but one of the things that he liked about the name, which he gave to her, was that sort of that sense of triumph over adversity, that ability to overcome obstacles. Now, granted, a romantics paper isn't quite the same as debtor's prison. Of course, it's all sort of relational, but he sort of liked the fact that she persevered and she came out and was sort of victorious and true to herself. And I think that's a really important component of the book, and certainly once I did finally read the book, that's something that I really was happy. It was a happy accident that this happened for her.
It took a long time for you to write this book, you've acknowledged.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that process.
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest this process in many, many ways, but on the other hand, it's done, and so it worked for me. I started it as a PhD student. I was in a writer's project, and we had to write for like 6 weeks, 5 pages, 5 days a week. So that got really tough, which is good practice actually for writing. It's just actually sitting down and writing when you don't think you have anything to say. And somehow I lucked into, I think that I had that idea about, Moll Flanders, and I started writing that, and people were enjoying it, so I kept writing it. And so by the end of the summer, I had about 60 pages stuff that I was kind of happy with and people wanted more. So I would kind of touch on it here and there, but it wasn't probably until about 2012 that I actually in earnest sat down and printed off everything I had and laid it out on a table and realized remarkably that there was a story arc. It was a very happy accident that that happened, and then I just started putting it together, and I was on sabbatical, I gave myself a month to see if I could do something with it, like if it was worth salvaging or moving on, and it was really quite remarkable how much, even though I'd only been writing maybe 10 pages a month, I had stuff to work with. A lot ended up on the floor, but I kept an awful lot of it. So that was pretty exciting to actually see that worked.
So what led to your decision to set Molly in the 1990s rather than any other decade?
Well, that's a great question. I think there's some pragmatic reasons. One is I left Edmonton in the mid-90s. It's a city that's undergone some tremendous change in the past 20 or 30 years, and I don't live there anymore, so it just seemed not quite right for me. It didn't sit right to set it in the present day. And as it turns out, one of the things that's been really useful about it is it's also pre-social media. And I think that as a writer gave me a lot more flexibility in terms of what she can do. It gives her lots of time on her own. These days we are never alone, it seems. We're always sort of connected. So it gave her a lot of time to do some reflection, think through things on her own. There's some plot things that wouldn't have worked in the days of social media, that's for sure. I don't want to give out too much. And then just other little things, like some of the jokes could actually get funny because she can't Google certain things, so she goes on sort of, for consumption, for example. She finds out Emily Bronte dies of consumption, and she just assumes that it's just this romantic thing, that she's just overwhelmed by beauty and the moors and the rain and all this stuff. She just dies from how consumed she is. Well, now she would just Google it and realize it's, TB. So I'm able to do some things like that. Keep her in ignorance for a little longer, which is kind of fun.
So the book is really funny, and I hope your publicist submits it for the Leacock Award, because it's just great. So it does have the elements of the romantic comedy along with some lovely satire. I really enjoy satires of English department goings on, so I really love that. About university life and funny descriptions of life in retail. How much of that is autobiographical?
Well, there's some obvious things that I cannot deny, that I did degrees at University of Alberta, and I did work at a very large mall there. But I think, there are some things that are somewhat autobiographical, but they're always totally exaggerated. I mean, the taupe thing, if you ever have worked in a shoe store, you would certainly recognize the taupe, and it's...
I have, and yes.
Yes, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So...
and that was for children's shoes.
Oh, okay.
So it's even less relevant than the different hues of taupe.
Yeah. But everyone always asks, are these real professors, are these real students? And I mean, I've spent my entire adult life sort of in or near English departments, and, everybody's sort of a exaggerated amalgam of types. The microwave thing comes pretty close. There's a microwave toaster oven thing that happens. That's pretty real.
You created a Spotify playlist as a soundtrack for this novel. Tell us about that.
Well, music plays a huge part in her life. She listens to it constantly. It helps her figure things out. It gets her out of her world. It gets her thinking about different things. And so it became really important. You really need to know. You need to hear certain things, and put some bit of Scottish music on there too for her dad. And but yeah, I did want to sort of connect with that sort of multimedia thing for the book.
Have you had a lot of feedback on it?
People think it's really cool. It's an odd little playlist. I don't know if you've listened to it, but there's some Puccini and some Robert Burns and some Oasis, and there is a mixtape in the book itself. So I originally was going to recreate the mixtape, and I thought I'll just do sort of a soundtrack instead.
Mm-hmm. What are you working on something now? What's your next project?
I have got 2 other book contracts right now that I'm excited about. They have absolutely nothing to do with the 19th century, really. One is I just printed it off before coming here, the first draft of a book called 100 Miles of Baseball, which I'm doing with my husband, Dale Jacobs. And we went to 50 baseball games of all different kinds of levels. And so it's called 100 Miles. I think the working title is One Summer, 50 Games, 2 Voices. And so it's some of that that we've got. And the other book I'm working on is about the Chatham College All-Stars from 1934, which is a black baseball team from Chatham, Ontario, that I'm working on with my colleague Miriam Wright, and we've been working on this project for a couple of years, so we're pretty excited about that. And then Irene and I are doing a project too on sandwich history, and that's pretty exciting.
Yes, it is.
Awesome. When do you expect any of these to come close to?
We're hoping to have a full draft of the 100 Miles by Christmas, and we should be on track for that. And I'm hoping to sneak some time in to write some more fiction too between those. So.
What is it like to co-author a book with your husband?
Well, we shall see, really. One of the things that is going to be useful about this book is that we do have those 2 distinct voices, so we shall see, but I think it'll be good.
So who's the bigger baseball fan, you or him?
Well, him, I think. Longer for sure, but it was a really interesting summer to try and think, because it was one of those things that at the end of the summer, like, do I still like this sport? As we're, because we did, I'd get home from work at 5:30 and change my shoes and be at the door and drive to Sarnia, like that kind of thing. And back that night. So there were a couple of moments where, what are we doing? But we would always be rewarded by something really quite magical and lovely. So,
well, we look forward to that book and all of the other projects, and just seeing what kinds of things you can use as bookmarks in the future.
Exactly. Well, I could make a little album.
Yeah. So we have a clip from your reading at your fabulous Windsor launch of Molly of the Mall. Could you set it up for us?
Sure. I started at the beginning because I thought that was the best place to start. And what this does is it sets up the whole sort of premise of it and where she got her name. She talks about how her father named his previous children after books on his syllabus, and she just happened to be born the week of Mall Flanders. So that's how that starts. And it also introduces life in the largest shopping mall that she happens to be working at.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
When you're named after someone or something, you spend much of your life asking why. Why Rita? Why Sequoia? Why Wayne Gretzky? Most people are named after a grandparent, a favorite aunt, or if you live in Edmonton, a hockey player. Your name might illuminate who you are, a historical moment, or what your parents wanted for you as they gazed lovingly into the tiny, squirmy wad of blankets you once were. Maybe your parents say, you were named after my great-aunt Rita, who studied art with Matisse, established a safe haven for feral cats in Regent's Park, and established an art school for underprivileged youth. We wanted to give you a name that conveyed her creative spirit, her compassion, and her commitment to social justice around the world. Or maybe you were told, I named you Sequoia so you'd always be strong and deeply rooted to the earth. Or maybe you were told, we named you Wayne because you were born the day they sold Gretzky to LA, and it's the least we could do for Wayne after all he gave us. I, however, am told you were named after the novel your father was teaching the day you were born. And now, 20 years later, I find myself at Canada's largest shopping mall trying to explain to someone how it was that I became Molly. I was completing the paperwork for my new summer job at Le Petit shoe shop and making small chat with Diana, the regional manager of the company that oversees 4 shoe stores in the mall. Polishing my new name tag, Diana said, Molly, that's a name you don't hear often. I was named after Diana, the Roman goddess of the hunt. Are you named after a famous Molly? I looked up from my paperwork and saw she was well named with her perfect hair and statuesque posture, and I suddenly felt very short and in need of a haircut. I had to confess, I was named after Daniel Defoe's novel, Mall Flanders. It was written in 1722. Without missing a beat, she said, that is unfortunate, isn't it? And I had to agree. But perhaps I should have used this opportunity to say, my name is Molly, but I go by Camilla, or Lucinda, or Isabella, and then I might not have to have had this hideous name tag in my hand with Le Petit shoe shop sweeping elegantly across the top in a luxurious italic font, while Molly at your service slumped in the middle in mundane Helvetica. After I signed the last piece of paper, Diana proclaimed, "You must be thrilled to be here at the premier mall in the country. We think you should be delighted to be part of Le Petit Chou family." I noticed she left no room for disagreement, so I nodded and attempted to agree wholeheartedly. Working at the mall would be very different from being an English major, but I was feeling up for the challenge. I was no longer Molly, soon-to-be third-year English major. I was now Molly, full-time purveyor of fine footwear at your service. As I made my way home on the bus, toting a large pink binder with "Manual for the Purveyance of Fine Footwear" emblazoned on the cover, I was thinking about how my life might have been different had it been named after a Roman goddess instead of a character in a novel neither of my parents like very much. What I didn't tell Diana was the long story that led to me being named Moll Flanders. As the children of an English professor and an art historian, you might assume that our names would have been chosen with a critical eye to symbolism. However, on the question of our names, there is a long answer and a short answer. I'm still working on the long answer, but the short answer is this. When my oldest sibling, Tess, was born, my father was a newly minted English professor, aglow and agog at the wonders of the British novel. The day she was born, he was preparing to teach Tess of the D'Urbervilles for his The Tragic Vision of Thomas Hardy graduate seminar, and he thought Tess would be a lovely name for his baby girl. My mother, apparently sedated, agreed. She later confessed that she had not finished the book or read my father's dissertation, as she claimed she had. When she did read the novel, she sobbed for our Tess's future. We named our daughter after a murderess? If there is an upside to Tess's name, it is this. Had she been born a week later, my father's class was reading The Return of the Native, and Tess would have been Eustacia Vi, and thus condemned to roam the heath she loathes. As Tess, she merely has dramatically flawed relationships with men, even when they're really nice. The downside of Tess's name is that my parents remained committed to using my father's class schedules to name their subsequent children. When my brother was on the way, my mother was convinced she was having another girl, and she thought that Catherine would be a lovely name. My father, feeling perhaps a bit guilty about the whole Tess thing, succumbed to my mother's lobbying and scheduled Wuthering Heights for his love and thwarted lust in Victorian fiction class around the due date. But Catherine was not to be. Their second child was a boy. After emerging from sedation, my mother agreed to name her new baby after another flawed fictional character, and they welcomed son Heathcliff. By the time I showed up, my mother had given up trying to stack the syllables. Partway through eponymy and eponymity in the British novel, I was born and named after Daniel Defoe's novel, Moll Flanders. A class earlier, I would have been Clarissa, and 2 classes later, Belinda. As my mother told me, your father first argued for Moll, but I got him to agree to Molly. I nodded gratefully, though noted that on every birthday card, note, or memo, my ever-tenacious father spells my name Molly with the Y in parentheses. I'm just going to skip a little bit here. Even though Moll Flanders is one of those novels every English major should read, I have gleaned enough facts from the back cover blurb to make me fear it might reveal something horrible about my fate. Here's what I know. Moll led, this is a quote, a life of continued variety where she was 12-year a whore, 5 times a wife, whereof once to her own brother, 12-year a thief, 8-year a transported felon in Virginia, and at last grew rich, lived honest, and died a penitent. I may be even more doomed than Tess. After handing in my final papers last week, I decided that I had a whole summer ahead of me and decided I should use this time constructively to finally read Moll Flanders. I stared at it all last night, but I couldn't bring myself to read more than the first paragraph and the back cover. So instead, I rewrote its back cover blurb. And here's the long quotation, which I'll try and get through in one breath because it's a long 18th century sentence. Okay. After several romantically melancholic years in Paris, where the stunningly stylish Moll Flanders dated 18th century equivalents of Jeremy Irons, John Cusack, and Alan Rickman, Moll moved to London, where she became a cautiously respected artist, fashionably misunderstood novelist, and discreetly sought-after milliner. After a life-altering disagreement with her 18th century Alan Rickman equivalent, who, while riding in a picturesque landscape in the rain, suffers a tragic fall from a very attractive dapple gray horse and utters, "Moll, forgive me," as his final words. The only one to hear his long overdue apology was the dapple gray, who promptly disregarded these words as consequential, Moll set out to make it on her own, possessing only her rapier-like wit and acute sense of style. Period. Right? Okay. In due time, she became an Augustan-era it girl and found almost true love with an 18th century Noel Gallagher, and then truer love with a John Cusack equivalent. I wrote 12 more versions of the blurb, all of them involving Alan Rickman, John Cusack, rain in a picturesque landscape, and an attractive horse of varying colors. Some included members of Oasis. No matter how many times I rewrote the back cover blurb, I had to come to terms with the fact that this Moll does not live in London, nor Paris, nor does she perambulate within a picturesque landscape sodden with melancholic rain. Rather, this Moll lives in Edmonton, where the men who love her are imaginary, fictional, or weird, and the landscape is flat and snowy 8 months of the year, and millinery is confined to the knitting of toques. Maybe instead of reading Moll Flanders this summer, I should write my own fortunes and misfortunes. And so, dear reader, I ask you, as Moll asks her dear reader on the first page, to, quote, give me leave to speak of myself under that name till I dare own who I have been as well as who I am. So that's the first chapter. And I'm going to just read, because we've got English students, and some of them are like newly graduated. Yay! Congratulations. So one of the things that we have in this book are some graphics. So as we've all been here, this novel covers a couple of semesters, and so she's doing some assignments. And here's one, she was on the phone until about 11, and then her paper's due the next day. We've all been there, right? So this is for her gender constructions of courtship paper that she has to do. So I'll skip to the middle of the chapter. When I finally got off the phone at about 11 o'clock, I picked up Pride and Prejudice and hugged it tightly. It occurred to me, if I were Elizabeth and I had a Mr. Darcy, he and I would have expressed our feelings for each other in the only possible way. We'd make each other a mixtape. After a long night, here's the beginning of my gender and courtship paper. Pride and Prejudice, the mixtape paper. Introduction. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a young man wooing a young woman must be compelled to show his affection through the creation of a mixtape. Similarly, a young woman shows her reciprocal affection for a young man through the creation of a response mixtape. While the mixtape is not a mode of courtship available in Miss Austen's time, if Elizabeth and Darcy lived in our time, their wooing most certainly would have involved the creation and exchange of mixtapes. The cassette tape I have included here attempts on side A to tell the story of Pride and Prejudice from Elizabeth's perspective, and on side B from Mr. Darcy's. In my selection of music and the accompanying explanatory liner notes, I attempt to show how gender informs how both Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth might have conceived of their relationship had they lived in the 1990s, had access to records, a turntable, and a tape recorder. And then there's some footnotes. In this assignment, I do not mean to imply anything about the musical tastes of Elizabeth or Mr. Darcy. Undoubtedly, both would have been fond of Motown, but it would be highly unlikely Elizabeth would have listened to Cher. Similarly, I predict Mr. Darcy would have balked at listening to the Ramones until Elizabeth gently realigned his limited musical horizons. Unfortunately, I think it highly plausible that Mr. Darcy would have liked both Foreigner and Chicago, and Elizabeth would learn to tolerate this because it might be one of his few failings as the dreamiest literary hero in the British literary tradition. So. All right, and then there's a cassette liner with the contents, and I have to admit the one I kind of like is Mr. Darcy has Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now by the Smiths. So. Anyway, that will conclude my reading. But,
Thanks for joining us. Look for more episodes of All Right in Sin City wherever you listen to podcasts, or check out our website, allrightinsincity.com. For information and announcements of new podcasts, sign up to our email list or follow us on Facebook and Twitter.